I remember the exact moment my life split in two. Before that sentence, and after it. I was standing outside the iron gate of the house where I grew up. My fingers wrapped around the cold metal bars. Inside, the lights were warm, familiar. Laughter drifted through the open windows, the kind of laughter that made a place feel complete. My father's voice stood out easily. It always did, strong, confident. The voice that commanded rooms and never questioned itself. Someone inside mentioned my name. I leaned closer without meaning to. Part of me still hoped to hear something kind. Something normal. Instead, my father answered without hesitation. "Tammy, she's not part of this family anymore." The words were soft, calm, almost polite. That was what made them hurt so deeply. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound emotional. He sounded decided. My chest tightened, like the air had been pulled away. I waited for someone to object. For my mother to say something. For my brother to laugh it off and change the subject. No one did. The conversation moved on. Smooth and effortless, like I had never existed at all. I stood there frozen, realizing this wasn't sudden. This wasn't said in the heat of a fight. This was something they had already agreed on, quietly. Carefully. Over time, for years I had believed silence was patience. That if I stayed calm, worked harder, proved myself, they would eventually see me. I thought love was something you earned by not causing trouble. By not asking for space. By staying small. Standing outside that gate. I finally understood the truth. I hadn't been invisible because I failed. I had been erased because I didn't fit. I looked through the window and noticed details I hadn't before. My chair was gone. The family photos had shifted slightly, like something had been edited out. Even my childhood trophies, once tucked into a corner shelf, were missing. It felt like walking past a museum exhibit where my life had been quietly removed. Something inside me changed then. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was a quiet shift, like a lock clicking into place. I wouldn't knock, I wouldn't explain. I wouldn't beg to be remembered. They thought I would keep waiting at that gate, hoping for permission to come back. They thought I would accept the role they gave me. The forgotten daughter, the uncomfortable topic, the empty space. They were wrong. As I turned away, I felt the pain settle deep in my chest, but beneath it was something new. Resolve. Control. Clarity. They had erased Tammy Caldwell from their story. But they had no idea what she was about to become, or how powerfully she would return. The morning air outside Charleston Naval Base was heavy with salt and steel. I could smell the river before I saw it. That sharp mix of ocean wind and metal, that clung to everything near the docks. I adjusted the leather bag on my shoulder and stepped forward, calm on the outside. Steady on the inside. I had been trained to stay composed, even when things didn't go as planned. The guard took my ID and scanned the list in front of him. His finger moved slowly down the page. Then he frowned and started again. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice polite but firm. "Your name isn't on the access list." For a second I thought he had made a mistake. He checked again. Same result. Inside the building I could already hear music. A brass band warming up. Laughter rising and falling in bursts. Glasses clinking. A celebration in progress. This wasn't just any ceremony, it was for my father. Captain Robert Caldwell. A living legend at the Charleston Navy Yard. And beside him, my brother, Lieutenant Commander Mark Caldwell, standing tall as the future of the family name. I stood still. The gate separating me from the life I once belonged to. Through the glass doors, I saw my father shaking hands with officers and politicians. His posture was perfect. His uniform spotless. Pride sat on him like a second skin. When his eyes drifted toward the entrance, they passed over me without stopping. Not because he didn't see me, but because he chose not to. Behind him, my brother smiled under the lights. Cameras flashed. On the wall nearby hung framed photos labeled, "The Caldwell Men Who Served." I read the words twice. Men. I was nowhere in the story. Not a footnote, not a mention. Just a gap. I looked down at the Navy ID in my hand. The sunlight caught the letters, reflecting off the plastic like a quiet protest. Proof that I existed. Proof that I served. Proof that I mattered, just not to them. The guard waited, unsure what to do next. I didn't argue. I didn't ask him to check again. I had already learned what lists were for, and who decided the names on them. Thank you. I said softly, stepping back. As I turned away, a familiar ache settled in my chest. It wasn't new. It was the same feeling I'd had at family dinners, graduations, holidays, standing close but never included. Always present, never claimed. I paused at the edge of the base and whispered to myself, maybe they never learned who I became. This wasn't rejection anymore. It was confirmation. I wasn't leaving because I wasn't invited. I was leaving because I had something far more important to do. They thought erasing my name from a list erased my worth. They didn't know I was about to rewrite the entire story, on my own terms. Washington didn't look like the ocean. But it felt just as cold. The buildings were tall, gray, and quiet, like they were trained not to react. Inside one of them, far from windows and sunlight, was where I worked. Naval intelligence, NOAA crowds. Just doors that locked behind you and screens that never slept. People like to call it desk work. That always made me smile. From my chair I could see more danger than most people ever would. Lines of code. Broken signals. Patterns that didn't want to be found. One wrong decision here didn't cause embarrassment, it caused funerals. I learned quickly how to disappear into the job. Long hours. Short words. No personal stories. The less people knew about you, the safer you were. In a strange way, it felt familiar. I had been invisible my whole life. Here, it was finally useful. Then came Operation Deep Current. It started like dozens of other missions, quiet, classified, urgent. A Navy SEAL team operating off the Somali coast went dark. No radio. No satellite. No trace. Every minute without contact increased the chances they wouldn't come home. The room filled with tension. Officers whispered. Screens flashed warnings. Someone muttered that the signal might be gone for good. I didn't believe that. I stayed at my station while others rotated out. 12 hours passed. Then 20. Coffee went cold beside me. My eyes burned, but I kept watching. Signals always leave scars. You just have to know where to look. At hour 39, I saw it. A pulse hidden inside interference. Weak, intentional. Someone didn't want it found. My fingers moved before my mind caught up. I rerouted channels, stripped away noise, rebuilt the signal piece by piece. When the connection snapped back to life, the room froze. A voice came through the speakers. We read you. 17 minutes later. The SEAL team was extracted alive. There was no cheering. No celebration. Just a quiet release of breath. The official report listed the coordinator as a single-word Spectre. No name. That was me. 3 months later, a letter arrived at my desk. No return address. Military handwriting. Whoever you are, Spectre, you saved us all. I folded the letter and locked it away with the rest of my silent victories. That night, I called my mother. She asked how I was. Then she told me my father was proud of Mark. Another interview. Another celebration I wasn't part of. I stared out the window at the flag moving in the dark. I know, I said. After the call ended, I took the letter out again. The word Spectre caught the light under my desk lamp. A ghost, unseen, unclaimed. Maybe the world didn't need to know my name, but one day, the people who erased me would be forced to face it. The letter from my mother arrived on a quiet afternoon, folded carefully, as if the paper itself might offend someone if handled too roughly. I recognized her handwriting instantly, small, neat, cautious. The kind of writing that never took up too much space, just like her voice in our house. She wrote that my father was being honored again. Another ceremony. Another speech. Another moment meant to celebrate the Caldwell legacy. My brother would stand beside him, just like always. Then came the line that made my hands stop moving. If you come, please don't say anything that might upset him. I read it again. And again. It sounded like every sentence my mother had ever spoken when my father was in the room. Don't correct him. Don't exist too loudly. It wasn't an invitation, it was a warning. Still I went. Driving back to Charleston felt like moving through a memory instead of a place. The Cooper River glimmered under the sun, beautiful and sharp, like broken glass. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked unchanged. White paint peeling in the same places. The flag on the porch angled perfectly toward the street. Even the silence felt trained. Inside, the air smelled of polish and old wood. My mother opened the door first. She hugged me tightly. Like she was afraid I might disappear again. Her perfume was faint and familiar, and for a moment, I almost let myself believe things could be different. Then I saw my brother. Mark sat on the couch like he belonged there, relaxed, confident, untouched by doubt. He stood and smiled when he saw me, but something in his eyes shifted. "Tammy," he said. "Still working with computers." "Something like that," I replied. He laughed, but it sounded thin, nervous. He couldn't hold my gaze for long. I realized then that I wasn't just the forgotten sister anymore. I was the reminder that his place had never been challenged. My father entered the room last. Even at home, he wore his uniform, every crease sharp, every button perfect. His eyes met mine, cold and assessing. "You didn't tell me you were coming," he said. "You didn't invite me," I replied calmly. He adjusted his cuffs and turned back to my brother. "Tomorrow is a big day for the Caldwell men. You can sit with your mother." Caldwell men. The words landed like a final verdict, the same line he'd drawn my entire life, legacy on one side, silence on the other. That night, I stood alone on the porch. The river was dark, the air thick with salt and diesel. I heard my father's old words echo in my mind: real service means facing danger. I smiled bitterly. He had no idea what danger really looked like, the kind that never makes headlines, where every mistake costs lives, and no one ever knows who saved them. 3 weeks after I left Charleston, my encrypted phone rang. "Commander Caldwell," a voice said. "Report to Norfolk headquarters. Orders are classified." I didn't ask why. I already knew something was coming. And this time, I wouldn't be sitting quietly in the back. Norfolk headquarters was silent in a way that made every footstep sound too loud. The kind of silence that didn't welcome conversation. The kind that meant something serious was about to happen. I straightened my uniform as I entered the conference room, keeping my face calm, my breathing steady. 3 senior officers stood behind a long wooden table. No smiles, no introductions, just a folder placed neatly in front of them. "Commander Caldwell," one of them said, his voice flat and controlled. "Your service record has been reviewed at the highest level." I waited. "For extraordinary contributions to national security," he continued, "you are hereby promoted to Rear Admiral. Effective immediately." For a moment, the words didn't feel real. They opened a small silver box and slid it toward me. Inside were 3 stars. Clean, sharp, heavy with meaning. I raised my right hand, took the oath, and felt something settle inside my chest, not pride, not anger, but certainty. I had earned this. No applause followed, no cameras, just signatures, a firm handshake, and a quiet dismissal. That was how real power moved, without noise. 2 days later, I returned to Charleston. The ceremony hall was full. Uniforms filled every row. My father stood at the podium speaking about honor, sacrifice, and family legacy. My brother stood beside him, smiling confidently. Everything was going exactly as planned. Until the doors opened. The sound echoed through the room. Heads turned. My father paused mid-sentence. I walked in slowly, my 3 stars catching the light. Then something happened that no one expected. 1 Navy SEAL stood up, then another, then another. Row by row, more than 300 Navy SEALs rose to their feet in complete silence. No clapping, no cheers. Just respect. The kind you can't fake and can't ignore. The room froze. My father's face drained of color. His speech papers slipped slightly in his hands. For the first time in my life, he didn't know what to say. Whispers spread through the crowd. People turned to look at him. Then back at me. The story he had told for decades, the one where I didn't exist, was collapsing in real time. I stopped a few feet from the stage and met his eyes. He saw me then, fully, not as a problem, not as a mistake, as a reality he could no longer erase. I didn't speak, I didn't need to. The SEALs stayed standing until I took my seat. Only then did they sit down, as one. The ceremony continued, but it was changed forever. That day, my family learned something painful. You can control a house, you can control a story, but you cannot control the truth. They tried to erase me. Instead, the world stood up and remembered my name. My family erased my name like I never existed. But on the day they celebrated without me, over 300 Navy SEALs stood up. And the truth destroyed everything they tried to hide.